Alright, this is the Chapter 2 review sheet for Math 7, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. Number 1 says, order the rational numbers from least to greatest. It's been a while since we've did this, so remember, if you have fractions, you need to change them to decimals. And for time's sake, I'm not going to work out all three of these, but to change these numbers into decimals, you simply divide the numerator by the denominator. So 4/5 is 0.8. Negative 4/3 is negative 1.3 repeating. And 2/3 is 0.6 repeating. Okay? You do not have to touch the negative 1/6 and the 0.9. Those are already decimals. So in order to order these from least to greatest, I'm going to draw a number line. Okay? And I look for the least value. The least value is negative 1.6. Okay, and I can write that as negative 1.6 because that's how it was in the problem. The next least is negative 1.3, which in the original problem was negative 4/3. And the next least is 0.6 after 0, repeating. Oops, and I wrote that as the wrong version. So you actually need to write that as 2/3. The next is 4/5 or 0.8. And finally, the greatest value is 0.9. So if I was writing these numbers in order from least to greatest, negative 1.6, negative 4/3, 2/3, 4/5, and 0.9. That would be your final answer. Moving on to number 2, complete the statements using greater than, less than, or equal to. Show all your work. What I mean by show all your work is change the fractions to decimals. And the only one you have to change to a decimal is this fraction. Okay? Number 2, remember these are kind of tricky because they're both negative numbers. But if 0 is right here, negative 2.34 is right there. And negative 2.43 is less than. Okay, so this is the less number. So negative 2.34 is greater than negative 2.43. On number 3, 16 over 11 changed into a decimal. Once again, you do the top dog in the house and divide it by 11 and use long division. For time's sake, I'm not going to do that step. But 16 divided by 11 is 1.45 repeating. Now this is tricky. We have 1.45 repeating, which is the same thing as 1.4555, on and on and on forever. This is 1.45, and the 45 is repeating, so that would be 1.4545. So now you need to look to see which number is bigger. They both have a 1, they both have 4, they both have 5, but in this case, the 5 is bigger than the 4 in the thousandths place, so that number is greater than 1.45 repeating. Number 4, find the distance between the two numbers on the number line. My hint to you is always to find the range. And the range is the big number minus the small number. Okay, so in this case it's 6.2 minus a negative 9.7. Now I'm subtracting decimals. Keep, add, opposite. My numbers are positive. Or excuse me, they're the same sign. So when my numbers are the same sign, I add and keep the sign. So I have 9.7 plus 6.2, and I get 15.9. My sign is positive here, keep that sign. Number 5, add or subtract, use integer rules. This is already an addition problem, so I don't have to change it to anything. My signs are different, and when my signs are different, I subtract the big number minus the small number. Okay, you're going to have to add an extra 0 there because remember with subtraction, I have to line up the decimals. So when I subtract these two numbers, I get 562.3. What sign do I keep? I keep positive because 15, the absolute value of 15.36 is bigger than the absolute value of 12.095. Number 6, another a subtraction problem, so I have to keep the first one and add the opposite, which is 5.28. Now my signs are different, so I subtract the big minus the small, which gives me 2.63, and the sign is negative because that 7 is bigger than the 5.28. Number 7, add and subtract fractions. I need to write my answer in simplest form. Remember, with adding and subtracting fractions, you need a common denominator. So this is going to be negative 35 over 9 plus negative 7 over 3. My common denominator is going to be 9, so I need to multiply the second fraction, and I get negative 21 over 9. Add the numerator. Signs are the same, so I add and keep. Negative 56 over 9. I need to change that into an into a mixed number using the J method, and it is negative 6 and 2 ninths. Number 8, subtraction problem. I need to change it to an addition problem, so I keep and add the opposite. Okay, keep, add, opposite. And change this to a improper fraction, which is 49 over 10. My common denominator is going to be 20, so I need to multiply this by 2 over 2, and this fraction by 5 over 5. I get 65 over 20 plus 98 over 20 gives me 163 over 20, which if I change into a mixed number using the J method, I get 8 and 3/20. Next problem, I need to evaluate the expressions when x is 5/8 and y is negative 5 over 3. So this first problem is x plus y, which is 5/8 plus a negative 5 over 3. And I need to first make a, oh my goodness, go away. Go away, line. Hello. I need to make a common denominator. My common denominator is going to be 24. So this needs to be multiplied by 8, this fraction by 3. So I get 15 over 24 plus a negative 40 over 24 gives me a negative 25 over 24, which is negative 1 and 1/24. Number 10, negative 2 times 5/8 plus a negative 5/3 plus y. All I did right there was plug in x for x and y for y. This is annoying me. So negative 2, remember, is the same thing as negative 2 over 1. So this is negative 10 over 8 plus negative 5 over 3. Again, my common denominator is going to be 24. So you got to multiply that by 8, multiply this by 3. I get negative 30 over 24 plus negative 40 over 24. Signs are the same on the top, so I add and keep. I have negative 70 over 24, which if I change into a mixed number using the J method, I get negative 2 and 11 over 12. Number 11, subtracting fractions. Remember, when you're subtracting fractions, you're really adding the opposite. Okay, so this one would be 3 1/5 plus 7 over 2. I need to change this into an improper fraction, so I get 16 over 5 plus 7 over 2. My common denominator is going to be 10, so I need to multiply this one by 5, this fraction by 2. I get 32 over 10 plus 35 over 10. Add the numerators. I get 67 over 10. Change it into a mixed number. I get 6 7/10 positive. Number 12, this one's kind of tricky, so bear with me. You must do the absolute value first, so it should be 2.4 minus the absolute value of negative 3.61 is 3.61. Now you can keep and add the opposite. So I keep and add the opposite. Okay, now my signs are different, so I subtract. So I have 3.61 minus 2.40, and I get negative 1.21. I keep the sign of the bigger number. That 3 was the bigger number. Number 13. Now I am multiplying fractions. Remember, this is much easier than adding because you do not need a common denominator. Okay, so negative 2 1/3 turns into negative 7/3 times 21 over 4. I look to where I can cross simplify. 3 goes into 3 one time. 3 goes into 21 7 times. So negative 7 times 7 is negative 49. 1 times 4 is 4. Changing that into a mixed number, I get negative 12 1/4. Number 14, dividing decimals. Remember, the top dog goes in the house, and the second number goes outside. I cannot have decimals on the outside, so I have to swoop 2 on the outside, 2 on the inside. I rewrite the problem as 216 and 745.2. Okay, now I'm ready to do my long division because there are no decimals on the outside of my problem. Excuse me. 216 goes into 745 3 times. 3 times 216 is 648. Subtracting those two, I get 97. Bring down the 2. 216 goes into 972 4 times. 4 times 216 is 864. When I subtract those two values, I get 108. Add a 0, bring it down. 216 goes into 1,085 times. And that goes in evenly. So, my answer right here is going to be negative because I have a positive divided by a negative. So my final answer is negative 3.45. Next problem, number 15. Number 15, you need to add up all of these problems. It's asking you for the mean. Okay, so the first one I'm going to do is 1.05 plus a negative 0.58. Okay, signs are different, so you subtract. When you subtract those two numbers, you get 0.47. I keep the sign of the bigger number, so it's still positive. So now these two are done. Now I need to add a negative 2.12. Signs are different, so I subtract, and I get negative 1.65. It's negative because that 212 is the bigger number. Then I need to add a negative 2.67. Now the signs are the same, so when the signs are the same, I add and keep. And that will give me negative 4.35. Okay, that is the sum of all these numbers. That's not exactly what it asked you. It asked you to find the mean, so I need to divide that number by 4. So to set up this problem, you do 4 and 4.35 in the center. And for time's sake, I can only do a 15-minute video, so for time's sake, this decimal should be negative 1.0875. Once again, you were just doing long division. Okay, just doing long division. If you have questions on that one, how I did that long division, you can email me. All right, one more minute. Number 16 says a recipe calls for 2.5 cups of sugar. You have 2 1/3 cups of sugar. Do you have enough? If not, how much more sugar is needed? Okay, here's how I do this one. 2.5 is really the same thing as 2.5. 2 1/3 is the same as 2.3. Okay, so the recipe needs 2.5. I have 2.3, so I clearly do not have enough. So I need to subtract these two numbers, find the big minus the small, to find out how much more sugar I need. Okay, so if you change these into mixed numbers, you get 5 over 2 minus 7 over 3. Finding a common denominator becomes 15 over 6 minus 14 over 6, which leaves me with 1 over 6. So I need 1/6 more cups of sugar. Okay, I found that common denominator by multiplying this by 2 and multiplying this by 3. Whew! I made it with 20 seconds to spare. If you have any questions at all, please email me at my Lindbergh email address, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you. Good luck.